I'm going to start again. Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone has stayed dry this rainy day, and I'm going to call this meeting to order. So we'll have a roll call to begin with.
Trustee Manhattan.
Here.
Trustee Chow.
Here.
Trustee Liu.
Here.
Trustee Vogel.
Here.
Trustee Long.
Here. All right. First item of business is board agenda approval. Can I get a motion?
President Young, may I, before a motion goes forward, can I make one request? I would like to pull consent item 7.1. It is the approval of our board advance minutes. We did have one error. We needed to make some additions when we went back through the listening to the recording. And so we wanted to adjust that, and we'll bring it back at the next board meeting.
So we need an amended motion then?
I move that we approve the agenda as amended.
Okay, and a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, Satish. All right, let's do a roll call vote.
Yes, trustee Manhattan.
Aye.
Trustee Chow.
Aye.
Trustee Liu.
Aye.
Trustee Vogel.
Aye.
Trustee Leong.
Aye. Motion passes. Thanks. Now on our agenda is our board study session, and this is the time for staff to present different topics within our district and public education space, and give us a chance as a board to really learn and take a deep dive into some of these issues. So tonight's study session is CASP, and I'll pass the time over to Superintendent Gauss.
Thank you. So we are excited. This is our opportunity. We really did want to highlight and share our recent CASP scores. So we have Allison Lanier, and she's joined by members of our Ed Services, Chris Izor, Marie Crawford, and Lynn Shimada. And so they'll be sharing the recent scores that we received from last spring's testing.
Yes, thank you. We're happy to be here. We are going to go through the different score areas, and then we'll highlight some of the focus areas that we've been working on to give you a window into how we're addressing some of these areas. This won't be your only time to hear about this. You might remember, as part of the LCAP process, when the California dashboard gets refreshed, we'll be coming with that information as well. So we'll be coming back to this information in different ways throughout the year as we plan for our next steps this year and into the next year as part of LCAP. So I'm going to pass to Chris, and he's going to get us started.
The sound should pick up on the microphones if they're on the table.
All right. Thank you for this opportunity. As Allison mentioned, we're going to be reviewing the CASP results. The CASP assessments were administered in the spring of last year. The assessments that we will be showing you today are the Smarter Balanced assessments and also the California Science Test results. We initially get this data trickling in throughout the summer, but officially it's released to the public usually around October of every year. It's also posted to the CASP test results website, and so it's publicly available. Anyone from the public can see the same results that we'll be looking at today if they were to go to the CASP website. Initially, we look at this data at the end of the year as part of our process to just before we leave for the summer to see how we did on the CASP results, but we do a more in-depth dive usually in the fall when we start to talk about our SIPSA planning process. Some of the glossary of terms that we just want to make sure we use a lot of acronyms in education, if you haven't noticed that. And so we always like to reference some of the acronyms that you're going to see today. CASP, of course, being the large umbrella of the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress. Underneath that umbrella are the Smarter Balanced assessments, the science tests, also the California alternate assessments as well. Smarter Balanced stands for the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. The consortium designs and delivers these computer adaptive tests, which are made up of both multiple choice, short answer, and also performance-based tasks that produce a composite score for each student. The California Science Test, which is administered at 5th and 8th grades. We use the term ELs sometimes, and that means we're referring to English learners. If we use the acronym ELA, that's short for English Language Arts. And then RFEP is for our redesignated fluent English proficient students. And those are students who were once English learners, progressed through language testing, and then were able to reclassify as fluent in the English language. Right off the bat, we wanted to initially show our overall results from last year. And what you'll see is that the graphic here will encompass both language arts and math. And then the subsequent slides will also have images for both language arts and math by school year. Overall, we maintained a high level of achievement in both language arts and math. We continue that strong tradition at 84.04% of our students who were at the met or exceeded standard for language arts, and 84.43% at the met or exceeded standard for math. And just to kind of, again, refresh your memory, there are 4 levels that a student can score at. They can score at exceeded standard, met standard, standard nearly met, and then standard not met. And so we typically take, in this case, the blue and the green combined together. That's what gives you the percentage in the middle. And so typically when you see that initial data, the common question people ask themselves, well, how does that compare to previous years? And so we wanted to make sure that you had the ability to see kind of how we have compared to the previous years. And the way you're going to look at these slides is you're going to start at the top left and then work your way clockwise around. So the results from last year being the 22-23 assessment will be at the top left, and then to the right of it will be the year before, 21-22, down below that 2021. And then we continue to include the 18-19 data in there because that was the testing year prior to the pandemic, just to give folks a little bit of comparison. And as you can see, we're for the most part flat between last year and the year before. We also want to make sure that we include the number of students who were tested in each year, so you can kind of see whether or not it's more or less based upon that specific group. And this is the overall group. This is all 3rd through 8th graders who tested last year. Kinder through 2nd grade do not take the standardized test. It begins in the 3rd grade.
Do you want us to ask questions as you go or at the end?
Which would you prefer?
Sylvia?
I think as we go, I think is, yeah.
Yeah, so I can pause here. Yeah.
So I just have a question about the number tested.
Yep.
Do you know offhand what percentage opt out?
As a whole, the district whole?
Yes.
I know that we meet our 95% threshold, so it's less than 5%. I don't have that specific number off the top of my head.
And are there specific schools like McCall, for example, that have higher percentages?
There are some schools and some specific student groups also that tend to opt out at higher rates.
Great, thank you.
I have a question as well for the numbers tested.
Sure.
Is there a reason that some students only, it looks like more students choose to test mathematics?
So because we have a high number of families that come into our district who are beginning English speakers, maybe they're coming from out of country or whatever. Any student in the US less than 12 months is not required to take the English language arts test,
I see, that makes
but
sense.
they are required to take the math. And so that's why you'll always see more math tested than language arts.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, and then,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
So you said that the mandatory is 95%. So if we do not, what happens? Till we get 95, we keep reminding. How does it work?
So the 95% participation rate on the test doesn't impact these scores. It impacts the dashboard results.
Okay.
And so when the dashboard is released in December and we get the little color speedometer dials like we tend to get, those, your actual color on the California dashboard can be affected by participation rate, but not your CASP results. These are just straight. They took the number of students tested and they gave you the number of students or the percentage of students who were at each of the 4 different levels.
So in a way, they get a second chance in case they miss it, right? You ask them to, is there a makeup time or anything for that in case they miss it?
Yeah, there's a makeup period during the testing window. There is a makeup period during the testing window for kids who are absent. If they weren't there on the day that their class took it. But, you know, sometimes students are not present during that entire time, or they're opting out, or other reasons like that.
There is a very small number, I would say less than a handful of students who did not take the test because they were absent, sick, or typically the students who are not collected in this data are the ones who actually formally opted out in writing. We have a large enough testing window. It usually opens at the beginning of April and goes all the way until the last day of school. So your student can test anywhere in there, even if they miss the predetermined schedule for testing.
So I also have a follow-up question, just to clarify, the reasons the numbers are less was because they're not including kindergarten through second. But that also means this year when they're testing, we're not including TK through second grade.
So there's no testing in math or language arts for TK through second grade. There's no standardized testing.
Right.
So
Okay.
the numbers that you see on the previous slide, it's less than our total enrollment because the number is just the 3rd through 8th graders testing.
And then in addition to that, you were mentioning that if there's any students that come from a different country who are English learners that has been here for less than been into the US for less than a year, they don't have to take the test.
They're not required to take the language arts.
The
portion of
language
test.
arts portion specifically.
Correct.
Okay.
But they are
So-
required to take math.
Right, and then my question is, for the percentages, I always goes to the standard of not met level 1 and nearly met level 2. And I understand this is for the whole entire district. Is that distribution about the same from each of the schools, or some schools have more of that part of that percentage?
So each school also has their data, and the schools do not necessarily mirror the district overall data, because the district overall data is an aggregation of each school. So some schools actually are higher than the 84%. Some schools are lower than the 84%, but they're averaged together to give us our district overall score.
Are there any schools that stick out that has more of the standard nearly met and the standard not met?
I can share with you the site data in the board letter, so you can take a look at that if that would be helpful.
Oh, like
And then-
a Friday memo?
Yeah, the Friday memo.
Okay,
That way you can take a look at that, and then you'll be hearing from the sites when they do their SIPSs as well. And then when we get the dashboard information also, that's another way we can look at the site by site information.
thank you.
So again, looking at district-wide data, the distribution across the grades and the 4 performance achievement level distribution. We have some data that you'll look at. One of the things that I want to draw your attention to is what we want to see over time is a reduction in the 2 lower bands and an increase in the 2 top bands. So the orange and the yellow reducing over time, green and blue getting larger over time. And so you'll see, while there is a little bit of variation in the blue at the highest level between the grades, what we do see consistently across each grade is that the number and the percentages of students in the standard nearly met and standard not met reduce over time across the grade levels. And this is for language arts. What we see in math is a little bit more consistency. The bar grows consistently, the standard exceeded bar grows consistently across grade levels. And you'll see that blue bar from going from 3rd grade to 8th grade getting larger and larger across the grade level spans. And still a reduction in the orange and yellow, but not as consistent that we saw in the language arts one.
Excuse me. So then
Yep.
on the ELA one, the fact that the blue bars are getting smaller, is that, have we seen this in past years too?
This
Jim?
matches with the similar data that we shared last year.
Okay.
Our math data, just the number of students in the standard exceeded tended to consistently grow across the grade levels. We see a little bit of variation in the standard exceeded in the language arts, but we do see consistently students reducing in the lower bars in language arts.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, I'm going to pass this over to Lynn and Marie, and they're going to start talking about some of the the specific student groups and their achievement.
So as we transition to subgroup analysis, we're going to start with our English learners. There's a slight decrease in ELA and an increase in math. Despite being in declining enrollment, our EL learner subgroup population is proportionally higher than in 2018-19. The good news is that once students are redesignated, they actually outpace our overall scores. So we continue to see an upward trajectory with slight increases in ELA and math. We also note that ELA and math performance has exceeded the 2018-19 levels.
And then moving over to economically disadvantaged students, I would like to note that although we are in declining enrollment, this subgroup has increased considerably in size. And we saw in a comparison from the previous year, there is a slight uptick in math and just a slight decrease in language arts. But when you compare to 2018-19, there is a considerable difference. So we are seeing good growth for these students.
Lynn, can I go back to the redesignated? Do you all have a theory about why our redesignated kids score significantly, I would say, higher than the general population, or no theories?
You know, research does tell us that students with multiple languages really do thrive. And so when they originally come to our schools, they don't have that second language yet, right? But once they do, I do think some of that is true. I mean, that would be one theory that I would have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you all agree with that? You think that's probably accurate?
Yeah.
Which speaks to why we should teach more foreign language or in our schools? Yeah, okay, thanks.
One other thing that, we didn't bring the data on this, but, some students, they have difficulty getting to reclassification. So some of our students who are struggling are not yet reclassified, and they're in that long-term English learner category, which isn't a large number, but it is a factor that we want to pay attention to as well.
Mhm.
Some questions? So in general, if you see the 4-year comparison, right? So 18-19, I thought that must be a relatively, that's a pandemic time, right? So relatively, it should be lower. But now if you see 23 ELA or English learners perspective, it's lower when you compare to 18
Which,
or even 21. If you go,
are you on the English learners?
yeah,
Yeah, in 2020, there was not reclassification because there wasn't LPAC testing.
So there's a bubble of a year where kids were not actually redesignated but stayed in this group. And so I think that can contribute to that little bubble, that bump.
What year was that?
I believe it was 2020.
Oh,
yeah, because 58 to 51, it has come down significantly. Okay.
So there are a group of students still in that, reflected in its data that typically may have been redesignated. But because there was not LPEC assessment, they were not.
So when they're redesignated, they go into the RFEP group, but the
Mhm.
process was paused because the state testing wasn't available at that time.
that was when they were developing that, right?
It was during COVID.
The
when they-
pandemic.
Yeah. And we couldn't
So-
administer the test
Yeah.
during that
So
time.
one of the criteria for a student to be redesignated is that it's based upon the previous year's statewide testing scores. And so when we had a year without statewide testing, those students basically remained in EL for an extra year when they probably would have qualified to redesignate. And so you see the bump both in the number of students in the group, but also in the achievement data, because those kids probably should have been in the RFEP data, but they stayed in the EL data for an extra year.
Yes, and when we look at the dashboard later this year, we will have an opportunity to look at the progress of English learners. This metric's a little tough for English learners because it's just proficient or not. On the dashboard, we'll be looking at their progress towards English language proficiency, which is probably a better way of taking a look at how the kids are doing, how they're moving through those progress levels towards proficiency. So we'll have a chance to look at that once the dashboard is released.
Okay, and then moving on to special education, we're pretty much holding steady. And when you look at both language arts and math and across the years, so not a lot has changed, and we're about the same as where we were in 2018-19.
So there's an increase in both ELA and math for our Asian subgroup. And then there's a slight decrease in both ELA and math for our white subgroups.
Our Hispanic Latino students, we're excited to see the change from last year. There was an increase for in math by a little over 5%, and an increase in English language arts by 1.5 percentage points. But we're not comfortable overall with where we are with this group, and are really working hard to close this achievement gap. So it's still an area of concern, but we're happy to see the direction that we're heading. And then similarly, now this group is quite small, the African American population. We had 61 tested in this last year. The previous year was 57. We see some shifts. There was a shift down in both English language arts and math. And so we're watching this group closely. It's challenging to watch because they're not a significant group at site. So we have to just keep it on everyone's radar, which they are doing. But it does shift. And then, you know, if we look at the numbers as compared to 2018-19, we've gone down. So we will just continue to watch this group closely.
There was a slight change in performance for our students of 2 or more races, with an increase in math and a decrease in ELA. And comparing our population from 2018-19, there's close to almost 200 student increase in this subgroup.
And then looking at our science results, there was just when we look at the overall results, there was just a slight dip from the previous year. And we are still a little bit above where we started in 2018-19. When we disaggregate the data and look at the difference between 5th grade and 8th grade, it tells a little bit of a different story. So our 5th grade students have taken a dip about 3.5 percentage points, 3.6 percentage points. Our 8th grade has increased by 2.2 percentage points. So as we look at the trends, we're seeing in 8th grade in particular just a steady increase. And in 5th grade, there was a little bit of a drop off.
So just to summarize some of the things that we noticed as we were looking at this information, we noticed that overall, we are maintaining those high levels in both English language arts and math. We see that students are gaining skills as they progress through the grades. We did attach that information that in board docs, but didn't review all of that, but that's where you can find that information. We see it steadily growing through the grades. And, we have many, many students who are exceeding standard, which is also very exciting. Some of the other things that we noticed is that overall, even though the overall percentages were very similar in English language arts and math is a real strength for our students. We have many students who are in that exceeded standard category. A higher percentage of kids in math than in English language arts are in that blue range. And as Marie mentioned, we did see some good improvement for our Hispanic students. We want to use caution when it's less than 2%. So we noted it, but it is hard to make any kind of judgment when it's less than 2%, really. Our results for economically disadvantaged students are on an upward trend. And we did see that nice growth for English learners in mathematics. And as we pointed out, seeing that more than 90% of the kids being in the blue or green are RFEP kids, that's pretty exciting to see, pretty amazing, wonderful. And also, this was called out just a few slides ago. We saw some increases for our students of 2 or more races in mathematics, and also for our Asian students in both mathematics and in English language arts. Middle school science, they've been climbing, and this is their highest achievement since the test began. It's still somewhat of a new test, and they also have recently had a new curriculum in middle school. So nice to see that that's continuing to show strong results and climbing over time. And some of the things that we have been working on and continue to be working on when we think about this data, we wanted to just call these things out, and then our team here will highlight some specifics. We've shared this core 4 of personalized learning. We've shared this a few times. It's one of our anchor graphics that we come back to. It's part of our strategic plan. We know that we need to continue to personalize for kids because they have different needs, different strengths, different areas for growth. We're continuing to focus on that. Over the last few years, we've been focusing a lot on extending learning time for kids who need more learning time through things like Summer Bridge and learning hubs and interventions, which is also part of our tiers of support work. So making sure that we have different kinds of supports when kids do need additional learning time or different skills. We are focusing on getting that learning accelerated for our English learners, continuing to focus on staff collaboration and professional development. In science, we really have heard from our teachers that the recent science adoption of Elevate, it's been hard. And so we are in the middle of a pilot trying out the STEM scopes, which had been used at Faria, and also it complements the middle school program that we're seeing such strong results from. So we're in the middle of that and eagerly awaiting the teacher feedback on if we should shift to that for grades 3 to 5. And we're also placing a strong focus on positive school climate. And this is, part of our sense of belonging, our focus on PBIS, positive intervention and support around student behavior. So that continues to be a focus. Marie will highlight some of our work in math.
Do you want to ask
Yeah.
a question first? Ava had a question.
Yeah.
Now that we're at the conclusion, my question kind of goes back to the numbers, and then it's not like it's a good thing, but the consistency of economically disadvantaged students. Are we able to provide additional services or support for these students? Because they're economically disadvantaged, they sometimes have more stresses at home than average students. And I noticed that the numbers, even though the numbers have doubled since the pandemic,
Right.
it has kind of, the percentages kind of stayed the same.
The percentage of the total population?
The percentage of their performances
Oh,
have kind of stayed the same. But my question was, are we able to provide the additional services that we have increased twice as much from like 600 some students to about 400, 1,400 students?
right. Well, this information is something we focus on, but it's also confidential information. So we don't disclose, which students are in the group. So that part is challenging. But we have added a lot of different supports in the system for students who are performing below level, as well as supports for students who are in other groups such as homeless or foster youth. We have lots of additional supports that have been added in recent years for family outreach, parent liaisons, different networks that can support families with community services, those kinds of services. So yes, we are able to provide those services when students need them. And then just in general, for any student who needs more support, we've been adding math intervention, learning hubs, reading intervention, additional mental health support. And then, of course, we concentrate through the LCAP, the supports at the sites with students who have higher needs.
Yeah, I wasn't asking for specific names or anything. I just wanted to make sure that because of the significant increase in that, it puts this stress on the system that you all are providing and ensuring that their needs are being met.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question too. So now, I think, the difference, at least if you take last 4 years, yeah, either maintaining or little increase. A significant changes across, I'm talking, but to make a significant change, at least we are not able to make it, or we are not, or is it, what I'm trying to say is it like should we have a target, or we achieved, this is how it is going to be, or something like that? Because how much ever effort you put in, probably the changes could be very minimal, something like that. Did you think on that in that line? Or every year we are planning to have increase of, let's say, 2% or 3%, something like that? Is there a target, or we are almost in that, that range?
Right. Well, yes. I mean, as part of our LCAP and our ongoing goals, we are always trying to improve this. I think sometimes one of the things that is important to keep in mind is that sometimes some of our interventions are happening in the earlier grades. And so it takes quite a long time for the results to show up. Right. So, for example, our reading intervention that we've been working on now for a couple of years, we've been really giving that strong support in kindergarten and first grade, recently implemented phonics and TK and new phonics program in the primary grades, but it's going to take years for the kids to get to third grade testing to be able to show an impact on something like that. So we're going to tell you about some of the things that we're working on and the strategies that we hope will have an impact. We're not satisfied with the results because we always want to be improving. We want to get as many kids as possible in the green and blue. That's our overall goal is to get as many kids, hopefully every kid there by the time they leave us in 8th grade so they can be ready to go on to high school. So that's kind of our North Star we're always driving towards, and continuing to build those tiers of support and supporting the school sites with the resources they need to personalize. So
And I think as you look at when schools and you're able to visit and see their SIPSs, they're always setting a goal to improve. And so no one's going to settle on where we are, even though we have some very high scores. It does, when you look at some of the schools that are scoring in the high 90 or mid 90s, it does become a little bit more challenging. A 2% is a huge growth for some of them. But then we also recognize some of those areas where we do need to be setting a larger goal and making that 3%, 4% growth. So we'll continue to target that and work towards that. And I think, as Allison and her team has shared, just putting in some of those interventions, it does take time to reap the rewards. And I think we're just starting to feel some of those and see some of those in the results. And I would expect these next couple of years to see even more as we put those interventions in at both math and reading, as well as EL.
Yeah, I was gonna say, remember when I'm during the SIPSA reviews at the different sites, depending on what's happening at that school. Like usually the principal will have like, oh yeah, I have a goal of
5%.
2% or like whatever for
Yeah.
this grade or this topic or whatever. So
Yeah. My concern was like, I think the effort versus return kind of thing. I know that not that you have to stop it, but probably to make a significant change, it to be maybe since we are having a decent high score, right? So that's what the challenge is going to be. But as well as said, the specific groups and things like that, maybe we'll have to target and see that, right? Because across, if you say it's pretty good, so maybe.
All right, so I'm going to highlight a few changes that we've made for math. In tier 1, just thinking about the classroom instruction that's going on, we have had a number of teachers, over 60 teachers, participate in professional development for numeracy development, as well as math workshop. So really learning how that structure can help support the teaching of mathematics. And then in tier 2, where we're working on some intervention pieces, we are providing targeted small group intervention for students in 3rd through 5th grade in elementary grades, as well as providing intervention classes, full classes at the middle school. So every middle school has a number of these math intervention classes that are being offered, which is exciting. And then we also are continuing to provide summer intervention programs for elementary and middle school. So those are the different pieces that we're doing for math. And, I'm super excited because we're doing this math intervention in the classrooms now. And the results are exciting. I was just sharing some of the results with Allison. It's great to see. And then moving on to science, Allison has already alluded to this, that we are engaging in a pilot right now with 3rd through 5th grade teachers. And 13 of the schools are represented in this pilot, which is exciting. We're going to be meeting in December to discuss how it went. So they're engaged in it right now. And we'll determine if this is a good direction for us to go and based on their feedback. So far, so good. They've enjoyed it and they're feeling like it's a lot easier to use, and there's a lot of teacher support. They like the instructional interface and the flow of the lesson. So that's just preliminary information that some have been sharing. I'll come back and share with you in February what the results are of our pilot, and we will dig in a little bit more then.
I have a question. Right, sorry. Going back to your math slide on the math 180, when students are in the category of needing help for math 180, is it additional supplemental class or is that their main math class?
It's an additional supplemental class for most. We are weaving it into the SAI classes as well. So that's kind of a hybrid approach where it's a workshop style program. So they're accessing what they need, but they're also working on their grade level curriculum in SAI. So it looks a little bit different than the intervention classes that we're offering. That is an added class for students.
So it's an added class, so they would take one less elective then.
Yeah.
Correct.
So this really helps with students who are in that, they still have another elective, at least for this year, for 7th and 8th graders.
Yes. And then we also are in the process of assessing to see, will they remain in the class for the next semester? So that's all going to be going on in December, going into January. So we do recalibrate and, we don't want kids to stay in the class if they've learned what they needed to learn.
So you say they recalibrate at the semester, you said?
Yes, yes. So we'll be using not only the diagnostic assessments that are a part of the program, but also iReady to help us.
Thank you.
Can I do a follow-up on that? So when you're saying reassess at the semester for middle school?
Yes.
Is that also the point at which they can potentially switch up or down? You know, for the levels?
For this particular program, is that what you mean?
They would still stay in their regular math class, but at semester, if they are ready to move out of their Read 180.
Yeah.
They would be able to shift into an
Oh,
elective, so they would
got
have
it.
2 electives at that time, so they would still remain in their math class.
Now, there may be students that we didn't scoop up in the fall, in the first semester. And it could be because they needed some reading intervention and now they're doing great and they're ready for math intervention. So that might happen as well.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then in English language arts, I mean, in ELD, we're really excited about this too. We have a new curriculum that we've started to use with our level 1 EL learners. So the ones that are like newcomers. And the math/ELD intervention teachers have been using this since the start of the year. So we're seeing some great gains. I've gone around and observed, and the kids are very talkative. You know, it's great. It's a super interactive program where they have conversations. They're learning language that is supportive of the school, community, family environment. So they're learning a lot of vocabulary that is very supportive. And so they're really enjoying it. So based on that success at 6 schools, we realized, boy, we should really expand this. So we're expanding out to all of the elementary classrooms. This is designated for 2nd through 5th grade. And then in the middle schools, we have our classes that are continuing to show success in the ELD classes.
This is something that teachers have been asking for. And so it was great to see this new resource being available. And so far we've heard positive reviews from people who are using it. So in the beginning stages of getting it out to everybody.
I think it is great that this is provided, because when you're English learner, having conversations is the first step. And then once they get comfortable, the reading comes easier. And then the final analysis is the writing part. So given that practice, a lot of times when you're learning a new language or in a country that's not speaking your mother language, then sometimes it's hard, you know, and it's sometimes embarrassing. So I think this is great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So our highlights in English language arts, really in the past 2 years, we've had this opportunity to bolster instruction in both tier 1 and tier 2 of reading. And so in tier 1, we really have emphasized structured, systematic, multisensory instruction. And so you'll remember Phyllis, you'll remember last year we implemented Heggerty phonemic awareness in all of our kindergarten rooms. And this year we have K2 Sunday Essentials phonics instruction in all of our rooms. In addition, we were able to update our inquiry by design units for middle school with more engaging text and updated resources. In tier 2, over the last 2 years, we've built a system of using diagnostic assessment in order to best meet the students' needs for intervention. And so based on those assessment results, we place them in one of 4 curricula. So we've got Heggerty, Sunday 1, Sunday 2, and LLI. And then we also have a reading intervention program using Read 180 in our middle school that mirrors the math program that Marie was speaking about. So that takes us to the end of our slides. So thank you very much for listening.
Great, thank you. Do we have any Any thoughts or questions, Jerry?
Just some thoughts, no questions. I maybe one question. The STEM scope pilot, so that's successful. We're looking at adoption fall of 24, right? It's okay,
Yeah, so we're looking at an adoption for third through fifth grade,
right.
Yeah,
so it's fifth
yeah.
grade. All right.
if it is successful.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. All right, thanks. So just, just thoughts, generally, thanks for the presentation. Very happy to see we're, continuing our record of, excellent academic performance. There are definitely areas to improve and there are, bouncy numbers up and down, but generally it looks to be a really good trend. So thanks for that. Maybe two specific observations. We'll go to slide 9, the one on the economically disadvantaged performance. So I was just maybe offering a sort of a perspective. Certainly we want to see blues and greens across all of these as much as possible. But when I look at the performance coming out of the pandemic, right, where you have about 40-some% in blue and green, jumping up to 60-some percent, that's really a close to 50% jump in performance in a year or two. And if you look at the overall number, you're looking at maybe 250, 300 students being in blue and green 2 years ago to, I would say, just eyeballing the numbers, 800-900 students. And that's I know the percentages can always be better, but I'm very happy to see that in absolute numbers, we've actually been able to help a lot of students improve. So I just wanted to kind of share that perspective. So that's one. And then if we go to, I think, slide 17 on science tests, just sharing another observation.
This one?
Right, that one. Right, the yellow bar there is actually really large, relative to red, right? And so basically what that feels to me is that I'll bet if I were to look at the actual numbers, that the distribution is actually skewed more to the green and to the red because there's so few reds. And what that tells me, there's probably a lot of low-hanging fruit there to convert the border yellows over to greens. And so, I'm happy to see we have the STEM scope adoption that may be coming next year, but that's just, for me, it feels like given, if you look at all the other rings we have, this is one of the ones where we have the fewest number of the reds. There's probably opportunities to move, just to pick up the yellows and convert them to greens. I'd be interested to see how that turns out next year, but thanks for the presentation. Thanks.
So I agree about the science. It's always important to me to have a consistent program through element. I say this, I've said it thousands of times. So I think having the STEM scopes, hopefully the teachers will agree throughout the grades is a good thing. And in terms of the percentages overall for the whole district in all the subject areas, I think coming out of the pandemic when we had significant learning loss, I believe, I think we should be patting ourselves on the back. I think we're doing really well, and I'm especially excited about the interventions. I think those are going to go a long way to helping those kids that are struggling in the lower parts of the graph. I worry about them. I think the ones that are up in the green are going to probably do fine regardless of what we do. But those kids that are struggling, I think are going to be well served by the interventions that y'all are putting in place. So thank you. Good presentation. Thank you.
Can you refresh my memory regarding science? What curriculum are we using for the middle school for science?
We're using STEM scopes.
Okay. And then in general, I mean, I concur with Phyllis that those who are performing in blue are going to do fine no matter what we do. I think I'm looking at intersectionality of some students who might identify being economically disadvantaged. Any of our Black and brown students, any of that when they have and then if they're on top of that, they're English learners, if we have a lot and maybe we can focus more effort on those students because they're at a place where they meet at all of these areas that they're at a disadvantage. So if we had to pick and choose, and there's a lot of things that who needs the most help, I would probably look at that. So, but yeah, I always tend to, as a teacher, like, okay, who needs the help? And you focus on that, knowing that the others perform well, which is good. So thank you for having the data.
Okay, I think, what I mentioned earlier, right? I think already my comments have, I think about where we are standing. I already shared that. Couple of questions on this, like, now I know a lot of intervention stuff is now planned and it's going good. At the same time, is there a measurement or how do you see the success of it? Like, I think Alison said that it takes a couple of years or years. So how do we make sure that we are going in the right direction, or what kind of feedback, or how is that mechanism working? Because 2 years may be a long time for us to see that, the return of that investment, right? So is there anything like where do we see that kind of, or would we be able to get an update like, hey, in the 6 months, this is what happened? So I know there's no formal way for us today, a testing or anything internally maybe, but is there some other metrics which we follow for us to see that we are making the right, right path we are going towards?
Yeah, so for example, in our reading intervention, we look at, for example, in reading intervention, we look at multiple data points and we keep track of it over the course of the year until a student exits. And so we track progress in iReady. We also look at all the subgroups in iReady, so how they're doing in phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, high frequency words, comprehension of literature, comprehension of nonfiction. So we track all of that over time. We also have district assessments that we look at. And so through the iReady platform, I can look at that subgroup to see if they're making progress. We also keep our own spreadsheets, child by child at every site, so that we can see their progress on our district assessments. And so at midpoint of the year, we go through every child to look at their progress to determine if they should exit intervention, if they should change intervention programs because they've mastered the skills in the one that they're in and they're ready to move on to another. So we do carefully monitor the progress of the intervention students.
So every kind of like once in a quarter, once in a half year kind of things you do that?
So we actually have ongoing assessment of all the students through the intervention program itself. So there are built-in assessments through the programs. So through Sunday, LLI, there's ongoing assessments that we do, but we also track larger benchmark assessments that all students take. So we are doing both things.
3 times a year.
Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. Thank you. And overall, it's great. And I don't have to repeat whatever they said. +1.
I definitely echo what my colleagues have said. I did have a quick question in terms of the interventions. Where does ELAP fall into all of that?
We didn't include that, but that is another big piece that we have going on in recent years. So ELAP is the program that serves our English learners, economically disadvantaged and foster youth students. So we're up to almost 1,000 students participating in that. We're about to extend the next round of invitations based on the opening day packet information from this school year. So yes, we're happy that we're able to offer that. And this year we added teacher liaisons at the sites to help bridge the school day with ELAP. So that's been off to an exciting start. And we have a lot of passionate educators from the school sites helping us with that and making sure the kids are having what they need and getting on their iReady time and things like that during ELAP. So that's been another big success, I think, of recent years. And I think it will continue to grow.
Great. Thank you for the presentation. It's really great to go into this data and at this granular level and see what's going on with all these different divisions of grouping. So, one thing I was thinking about is these last couple of years post-pandemic, we keep talking about how it's recovery, like we're focused on recovery. But then when I see the data, I'm like, oh, we're not just recovering, we're advancing. We're doing, our students have really been able to have that resiliency and exceed some of the things that we had even hoped for. And so it's really just a testament to everything that our teachers are doing and to the strategic decisions that the district leaders, you guys are making, and of course, like the wraparound services that we're providing. So I'm really happy to see all of this. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Chris, Marie, Lynn, and Allison. And I think with that, should we take a quick
Maybe
break?
about 5 minutes.
Yep.
We'll start next.
We'll take a 5-minute break and then we'll open at 6 o'clock for our opening items. All right, my mic is on and we are back from our study session. So good evening, everyone. It's so good to see so many of our families and students with us tonight. Glad there is a break in the rain. And our next agenda item is the flag salute. And so we have a student from Blue Hills Elementary who will be leading us today. So welcome, Keston, and invite you to come up to the microphone.
Good evening. CUSD members, staff, and members of our community, please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Keston. All right, our next agenda item is our school presentation, and we are excited to have Keston as well as Nivi and Claire from Blue Hills, and I'm going to turn the time over to Principal Mitchell.
Well, thank you for having me here to represent Blue Hills. I want to invite up Keston, Claire, and Nivi. These are 3 fourth graders from Blue Hills. You guys can come on up. They're going to help me present in just a few minutes. But I wanted to share a little bit about what Blue Hills has been up to regarding sense of belonging. I know this is something that all of our schools in our district is focusing on, but I wanted to give some updates that are specific to Blue Hills. And on the next slide, you'll see that Blue Hills right now is in.
You have.
Oh, that's what that is. Yeah. The next slide here, Blue Hills is right now in year 2 of our PBIS journey. It's helping students and staff kind of reframe our thinking about behavior and student expectations. And part of that is our Bobcat Bs. So being safe, responsible, respectful, and kind. And those are really at the heart of all of our decision making here at Blue Hills. And in the middle of the slide, you'll see this is our Golden Bobcat Award, and it's passed from staff to staff at our about weekly staff meetings. And we recognize one another for being safe, respectful, responsible, and kind to one another. So it's something that the students are practicing, and then it's also something that we honor as a staff as well. And also, a really exciting piece about being at Blue Hills is we have been really diving deep into community circles at Blue Hills. Each and every one of our classrooms is engaged in this work, and it is a really nice way to set the tone in the morning, to offer a welcoming piece to the day. And community circles can be used in a variety of ways. Sometimes they're used to solve problems or to get to know one another. But we're really proud that each of our classrooms has morning meetings and morning gatherings. Sometimes they're called different things, but we had Karen Yunker from our restorative practices come to Blue Hills. This is actually from last year, and she demoed many different restorative circles with our staff. And then we actually have a lot of videos that show the work that she did with our staff and at other schools as well available. So staff can use that as ways to learn about how to lead restorative circles in their own classrooms. And a new feature to Blue Hills is our calming corner or our Zen den. And this is a space at Blue Hills. It's actually our conference room, but we repurposed or dual purposed it so that it can also be a space for students when they need to find a little time to regroup or take a breather or try our tiny trampoline. But it's filled with different resources that were curated by our special education team and staff members. So there's OT tools, there's calming strategies, there's physical activity, gross and fine motor, just different activities for students to do as they need throughout the day. So this is something that we're really excited to offer to students. And in the calming corner or Zen Den, there's different norms, there's grounding techniques, there's different agreements for how students use the space when they're there. And sometimes even staff members come in and hang out in the Zen Den for a little bit too. And one thing that I really want to highlight is the panorama data. For several rounds of our panorama assessment over the last couple of years, Blue Hills had been taking kind of a decline, and we were trying to problem solve the reasons why. So we really made a lot of effort over the last several months to really boost up our sense of belonging, hone in on all of the really important SEL work that we're doing as a school. And I am so proud, like beyond proud, that our school has increased its score in every single category. Self-efficacy, engagement, sense of belonging, social awareness, grit, and growth mindset. So this is huge praise to our staff. We have fantastic staff that are leading the way in every single classroom, and all of the different specialists and support providers as well. So round of applause to our staff and to our students as well. And then this is just another visual as well. So we made some really tremendous gains, and we're not done yet. We're just going to keep growing, and we're excited to share our journey of belonging with you as we continue that work. And then next, I'm going to invite some of my fourth grade friends up, and they're going to share some things that they feel are really important at Blue Hills that help boost our sense of belonging. So our first topic is clubs. We love clubs at Blue Hills. So I have Keston, who's going to talk a little bit about clubs.
Blue Hills has about 9 clubs during the school day. The largest one is Running Club, also called Bobcat Labs, and all of Blue Hills participates. Some clubs were made by staff, and others were made by students who were interested in a certain topic. Sometimes I join Running Club on Wednesdays, and I would like to start joining our lunchtime Lego Club too. Some of the other clubs that take place during the day are K-Kids, Litterbug Club, and Origami Club. Let's keep the clubs going.
And the next section is all about clubs that happen after school. So Claire is going to share.
We are so lucky to have tons of clubs after school, including Bollywood Dance, Board Games Club, and Girl Scouts. One of my favorite clubs is a knitting club, which I am a member of. In this club, I learned how to knit for the first time, and I even made my own hat. This club was fun because while I was knitting, I also got to chat with my friends, Mrs. Hunt and Mrs. Hickman, who led the club. Later this year, we will have our second wave of drama club for grades 2 and 3, and we are also considering a ceramics club, which I would love to join.
Thank you, Claire. And the next section is all about friendships at Blue Hills. So this is Nidhi to talk about friendships.
I joined Blue Hills this year as a 4th grader. Everyone is very kind to me and very inclusive. Everywhere I go, I see that our students are surrounded by friends, and I have never seen anyone alone. When I joined Blue Hills this fall, everyone was so welcoming to me, and I made friends very quickly. The second day I spent at Blue Hill, I already had 7 friends. There is never a kid without a friend, and there are always ways to join in with others.
Thank you, Nidhi. And the next section is all about adults that care about me, and Nidhi will present again about this.
Our teachers and staff work tirelessly every day so we can learn new things and have fun. Our local sheriffs keep our campus safe, and they even find time to teach students basketball during recess and lunchtime. The parents and family members who come to volunteer on campus don't have to, but they choose to spend time with our students. We have so many caring adults around us.
The next up is student jobs, Whitware.
Students are busy here at Blue Hills. Blue Hills fourth and fifth graders help support our school community by volunteering for student jobs. Some jobs include marquee helpers, flag crew, and cafeteria assistants. I would love to join the rainy day puddle jumpers job later this year. They help out on rainy days. Our teachers mentor us in these leadership roles, and then students help around campus during the year. I like helping students, teachers, and our school community.
That is Captain about belonging here.
I belong at Blue Hills because we can make friends and find out what our shared interests are. And then we could do those things together. For example, you can't just play soccer alone. You need a team. There is a variety of activities here. Another reason I feel like I belong is that I can tell that staff and teachers care about us because they learn our names and get to know us. The last reason I belong at Blue Hills is that I can be myself here and I feel like I can grow as a person.
And just a huge round of applause to our student. I have to say, I was so proud of them. They really wrote the majority of these presentations on their own, just with a little guidance. So we're excited to welcome all of you to Blue Hills when you're able. And we're excited to carry on our belonging journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal Mitchell, and thank you to Keston and Nivi and Claire for sharing about what makes Blue Hills so special. It's really exciting to hear about all these things like the Zen Den and the running club and the knitting club, which I definitely have to join because I don't know how to knit and I would love to knit my own hats. And it's just great to see all the friendships that are being formed. So with that, I'm actually going to have you guys come back up here so we can take a photo with you. And parents, you're welcome to, get in a good spot to take a picture if you'd like.
There. Okay, here we are. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, we want to thank Blue Hills again for being here and sharing with us tonight. We are going to move on to our next agenda item, which is employee organizations. So Erin, do we have any representatives tonight speaking?
We do. We have CEA President Kate Lee. If you'd like to come to the podium.
Welcome, please.
Back up.
A little bit.
Good evening. For the next 3 board meetings, CEA wants you to hear from our directors and members. Tonight, we are focusing on special education. So I'd like to introduce CEA Special Education Director, Dr. Helen Sung. Helen joined CUSD in 1996 and has worked in elementary and middle schools throughout the district. She completed her doctoral research in 2007, and her work continues to be published in multiple journals, and she addresses members at conferences around the world. CUSD students, parents, and staff are so fortunate to have access to her wealth of knowledge and experience. And CEA is so fortunate she has taken the time from her professional work to represent our special education teachers and support providers. Thank you, and here is Dr. Helen Sung.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of special education. Okay. So when I started my career, it was actually in 1990. And we used to think in terms of students belonging to special education or general education, as if we were separate entities and kind of operated in silos. But today, we know that there is a continuum of abilities and disabilities. Special education is a continuum of educational process that includes all students, even those with neurodiversity. Students are included in general education and mainstreamed for least restricted experiences to the extent possible. For this reason, we have special ed services that reflect the continuum of disabilities. Resource services are for students with mild disabilities. Only 1 or 2 academic areas are significantly low due to their processing deficits or other challenges. Resource teachers are expected to maximize services for students who have greater need when they are split between 2 schools and they're servicing more than 1 schools, and time's limited. In addition, every student with IEP require teacher consultation for mainstreaming, parent consultation to address concerns, annual reviews, triennial assessments, monitor progress, and update goals. Resource teachers are also case managers for any initial assessments for special education services. The number of caseloads does not reflect or capture the workload because every student has different intensity of needs. We have special day class for moderate disabilities, where it is academic focused, but the academic needs are expansive because of their disabilities. The students receive services in the core subject areas such as language arts, reading, math, and writing in special day class. The problem here is that the teachers are expected to manage severe behaviors and teach at the same time, which is an impossible task for anybody. We have special day classes for severe disabilities, where focus is on functional and adaptive skills. Often, these students have multiple disabilities and require occupational therapy, speech and language services, communication device, vision or hard of hearing services, and adaptive PE. Every student requires individual support for safety, self-care, hygiene, behavior, and movement. Teachers are expected to do more with less aides in the classroom. They cannot get to every student at the same time. Again, an impossible task. As I said, I joined Cupertino in '96, and it has been an outstanding experience overall. With good leadership, we had professional autonomy, team decision-making, and respect for professionals. However, the things that we had worked so hard to maintain seems to be dismantling more than ever. The current top-down approach goes against the collaborative team process where the experts in their discipline in the multidisciplinary team work together for the best student outcome. These challenges mentioned above stretch special education service providers too thin and cause burnout. Many have reported health and emotional distress. If we are serious about success of all students, then please support our special education teachers and support staff's well-being and professionalism. Thank you for your attention. Now, public comments from our CEA members about their experience with special education will follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. All right, well, we are going to be moving on to public comment. So thank you for that segue. This is the time for public comments. It's our agenda item 5.1. Public comments for items that are not on the agenda, and we do limit each comment to no more than 3 minutes per person, depending on the number of comments that we have, for a total of 20 minutes during this segment of the agenda. If not all comments are able to be heard on the non-agenda items, then we do continue with the rest of the agenda and then go back to public comments at the end of our written agenda. So as a reminder, this is just a time for the public to make comments. The board cannot respond because of Brown Act rules and protocols. And we always welcome the voices of our community to come and speak. So, Erin, how many public comments do we have?
We have 4.
4. Okay. With that, then I assume we're good with 3 minutes? Okay,
Okay,
would you like to call the first one up?
yes, our first speaker is Dmitry Neronov. If you could please raise your hand. Go ahead, Dmitry. Dimitri, you will need to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Can everyone hear me?
No worries. There we go.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. This is my 8th year as a teacher serving visually impaired students at COSD and 2 other school districts. I am speaking tonight because I believe supported educators equates to successful and confident students. I'm a part of so many great schools with dedicated staff and families, and I'm really pleased that management has worked out solutions that meet my own needs and having a more manageable workload so I can serve my students most effectively and efficiently. One thing that's worked really well this year is that management was receptive to my feedback so that I can grow with my colleagues at the monthly special ed department meetings. We were allowed to steer the course of these meetings in areas that pertain to our jobs the most. This month, I and another teacher from the Vision team presented to my colleagues about universal design for learning to benefit all students. That said, I brought up my successes and my challenges to my colleagues in the Vision program, though I can only speak for myself with these comments. And I believe that communication is a big area of growth. I am most responsive and work best when communication is clear, tactful, and diplomatic. And if correspondence in conversation isn't clear or comes up as harsh, then I'm reluctant to ask for help. Teachers for the visually impaired are a niche group in special ed. It's in our best interest to stay on top of the rapid developments of new technology and research in visual impairments. In past years, some of the conferences that I and my Vision program colleagues attended have been covered by the district, but the funding doesn't appear to exist anymore. As the Vision program is cost shared between COSD, the Sunnyvale Elementary School District, and the Fremont Union High School District, I propose that management and the board reach out to those districts as pathways for PD funding. With more funding options for PD, the district can foster our growth as educators more. In the spirit of Thanksgiving, I am really thankful for the support from all the staff and the families that I work with. So I really appreciate the teachers, the principals, the secretaries, IAs, and my own colleagues. There's that sense of belonging at many of the sites I work at. I do ask that the board understands these concerns to ensure educators like myself are supported and every student with an IEP can achieve the success that they deserve. Otherwise, if our needs are not met as teachers, then our students may suffer as well. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dimitri.
Our next speaker is Kathy Mastrini. If you could come to the podium or raise your hand if you're joining virtually. Go ahead, Kathy.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I apologize. So good evening. My name is Kathy Mastrini. I am the deaf hard of hearing specialist of CUSD. I've worked with children with hearing loss and their families as either a teacher, a therapist, or an administrator for over 33 years. 16 of my years have been with CUSD. And I'm speaking today because I believe that supported educators equal successful students. To begin with, I am so very lucky. I have loved my career for more than 30 years. I love what I do, and I still love what I do. As of this week, I can see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel for me. Let me back up a little bit and let me explain. The caseload for the deaf hard of hearing program has tripled over the past 16 years. The provision of service has not changed, and thus my specialized assistant and myself squeeze traveling from school site to school site throughout CUSD to service students with hearing loss in their home schools, which philosophically is so important to me. The IEP paperwork and the amount of documentation required by the district, by the state, by federal agencies has also significantly increased. The time it takes to complete the required paperwork outside of the workday has significantly increased. Many evenings over the years, I've taken work home after work after working an 8 to 9 hour day or even a 10-hour day. The workload and the hours for special education is difficult to sustain and can significantly impact the work-life balance. So I want to bring a case in point. Last night, I emailed a colleague, or actually it was yesterday during work, I emailed a colleague asking if her paperwork would be ready to send home in advance to the family prior to an IEP. She emailed me at 9:12 last night and shared, I will get on it tonight or tomorrow night. I have 7 IEPs this week, so I am a little in the weeds. She is a very committed staff member. She is also a mother of 2 children under 5 years of age. The work-life balance doesn't sound balanced at this time for this woman. More special ed providers are needed to bring down our caseloads, please. So back to the light at the end of the tunnel. This week, a specialized instructional assistant was hired and began working to help support the DHH program. So there's now an additional person. After 3 days of having an additional.
Kathy, is Kathy still on? So the time is up. Apologize for that. Thank you so much for the comment, and you're always welcome to email us the rest of your statement or the rest of your comments or the whole thing to us at board@cusdk8.org, and we do read every email, and thank you so much for coming to speak.
Our next speaker is Mary Nell Darling. If you could come to the podium, raise your hand.
Okay. I was told I had 2 minutes, so. Okay, so hello, members of the board. My name is Mary Nell Darling, and I'm a mild mod K2 SDC teacher at Collins Elementary. I've been with this district for 4 years and but have a total of 21 years teaching in special education. I'm speaking today because I believe that supported educators equal successful students. Here are some examples of some things. Here are some examples of what we face daily. First and foremost, we are expected to do too much unpaid overtime, which greatly dilutes our pay for a contracted day. Not to mention, we have no work-life balance. Since IEPs are time-sensitive legal documents, we are always faced with a choice after our school day that we either work many hours for free and have very little personal time, or we don't and we lose our jobs. If we work to rule, no IEPs would be done. So really, it's just too much and has been for years, yet requirements increase weekly and sometimes daily. This is why so many people are leaving teaching. It's just inhuman these days. To be expected to keep up with our job requirements is physically and emotionally exhausting, and it degrades our morale because it builds resentment. We just want a life and money. Or right now, I'd take the life. I'd want the time. So for most of us, we work 2 to 4 hours after school every day and on weekends, which equals about 15 to 25 hours of unpaid work weekly, 60 to 100 hours extra per month. And that's pretty normal because we're just dealing with the kids all day long from the moment we step foot there to the moment they go home, and we are exhausted at the end of the day, yet we still have to work, and we do. So some solutions to this would be right now we have 3 IEP days per year. Monthly IEP days would be great. It would really help us to be able to do that during work hours. Extra pay, obviously, but time is precious and short. We're also, I was supposed to say this earlier. I love helping students with disabilities and their parents. I'm proud of what I do. And I enjoy seeing children grow, parents being excited about the learning that their child is showing. But I just don't love how much life I have to give up to do this job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Our final speaker is Eric Lee. If you could come to the podium or raise your hand if you're joining virtually.
Can I speak now? I'm not used to this. Yeah, okay. Members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I want to tell you about my experience as a teacher at McAuliffe. I started in 1994. I checked the seniority list and I'm 22 in the district. And from what I saw, the next highest special ed teacher is 75 spots below that. I think there might be some mathematical reasons for that, but I also think one factor is burnout. McAuliffe is a very community-based school, and we have a lot of presentations and meetings and conversations with parents after school. And so most families go home, they have dinner, and they return to school. When they're returning to school, that's about the time that I'm leaving school, which is around 6, so that I can make a break between my work life and my home life. Our school is also unique in that we have 15% of our student population has IEPs, which is higher than any other school in the district. From what we calculated, all the other schools are under 5%. And our school also covers TK through 8, which is the largest breadth of students that they carry in the district. Aside from paperwork and logistics and emails and phone calls, we're also expected to teach. And that's the most important and most beneficial and rewarding part of my job, but the other parts really interfere with that. I'm at 27 on my caseload, which is one away from the state caseload for resource, and my coworker is at 25, and we're not even halfway through the school year yet. We don't have SEC, so this is with 2 resource specialists at our site, just 2 resource people. Something that would benefit us greatly is having more behavioral interventionists on site, or being able to be on campus and help us, and more IAs. It would help us. We try so hard to work with the students, and we want to do that to the best of our ability, and also be able to maintain our mental health. I feel like it's more economical to keep people that are dedicated and have been here for a long time than to have a revolving door of having new teachers come in all the time to replace the old ones that are quitting, because you have to retrain them and they have to go through a lot to learn. It's a hard learning curve when you come in. I've appreciated the time that I've been here, and I will continue. I'm not sure how long. Thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Eric. All right, thank you to everyone who came to speak online or in person. So now we are going to move on to our next agenda item, which is the superintendent's report. So Superintendent Yale, I will turn the time over to you.
Thank you. So I did want to take a little bit of time this evening, and I think we're in the holiday mode and oftentimes doing that reflection, but really kind of capturing some of what we've heard over the last week. I know that as board members, you received a lot of emails reflecting on our CAS presentations and really reflecting on the successes of our district that we've had over the last couple of years through many, many challenging years. And we know that that's really due to the work of the staff. And we also know that listening to our staff is very important. And, I think that's one of the efforts that as an EC, we have really tried to do over the last couple of years, is really listening and hearing and trying to react to it. I think one of our challenges always is that we're a large district. And while we're doing some amazing things, we know that there's still a lot of work to be done. And it really is trying to find that time and that pace and the funds to be able to continue doing that. And I think as a board, we've all recognized too that we need to be strategic about it. We're not going to be able to fix everything at once. We are going to need to be strategic in each year adding that. And as I was sitting in my office earlier today, I was reflecting and, we do a lot of conversations about intervention and support. We've heard some comments this evening. I know that we've heard from some of our staff throughout the week, and I certainly hear when I go out on our EC visits, just there's more challenges in the classroom at this point. We're seeing behaviors escalating in some of our students. We're just seeing a change in our demographics, and it is challenging because we continue to be academically very strong and we want to continue on that pathway, but we also have to address those other issues that are going on in the classroom so that our teachers can spend their time and teach. And I think it's important, the changes and shifts that we made over the last couple of years, I think really are a reflection of listening to the voices of our staff and trying to respond to their needs and their ask. And when I was looking back in just a short time, when you think, we've added intervention math teachers, intervention reading teachers, we've increased our mental health, we've added music teachers, we've added our student success liaisons at 2 of our middle schools and are going to expand that to the rest of our middle schools. We've added an AP. We've added ELIAs, and really all of that really has been, I think, in response to the work of our staff saying we're doing good things, but we need to do more. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that sometimes we forget how much we've done. And while that's important, we also realize that there's a lot of work to do. And so I do just want to express that we value and when we hear this, we do take it back. Do we have a solution for everything? Probably not, but we're certainly going to continue to work on it. And I am truly, truly optimistic that I think we have a very collaborative relationship, and I hope we can continue that with our employees and with our unions, and together we'll resolve and solve the problem. And so I am very optimistic about where we're going. And, again, it was great to hear our results as our testing scores, but also the questions that you posed. Are we happy and are we okay with where we're at? Absolutely not. We always want to continue to grow and continue to push. And we know that that's a little bit more difficult, and it may mean shifting some of the things that we're doing. And that really does come down to that support and intervention that we know is so important. And so that really will be our focus as we move forward. So just wanted to share that as kind of that reflective mode, and I'm looking forward to what's ahead for us. So that's it for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Yao. All right, we're going to move ahead to our consent calendar. These are items concerning routine school operations or items we've already reviewed and discussed. And so we stated earlier we are going to remove, I believe, 7.1. I believe that's the only one that we're moving,
Yes.
right? For tonight's vote, and we'll repost it at a later date. So can I get a motion?
I move to approve items 7.2 through 7.8.
Oh, second.
Great, thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Ava. Do we have public comments on these items?
No, we do not.
All right, let's do a roll call vote.
Trustee Manhattan.
Aye.
Trustee Chow.
Aye.
Trustee Lu.
Aye.
Trustee Vogel.
Aye.
Trustee Leon.
Aye. Great, thank you. Motion passes. And we are going to move on to our discussion section. So 8.1, first is the update on the bond survey research. So
I will pick it up, and I did want to note, Chris Ju is joining us virtually, so I saw that he's online as well. We also have Dale Scott here tonight, and just kind of a refresher, Dale had joined us back in August when we began having a conversation about the possibility of putting a general obligation bond onto our upcoming election in 2024. And so he did share some information at that time. I know the board had some questions and wanted to bring back some additional information. So if the interest is still there to go out to a survey, Dale can kind of walk us through what that might look like, and then decide what is our next steps there. So, again, continuing that conversation about the needs as we look at our infrastructures and wanting to ensure that we're given the highest quality learning environment for our students along with the academics. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dale.
Thank you. I assumed you just wanted to grill me a little bit more, but, which I'm happy to be grilled. If you'd like, I thought I would take you through how these instruments are designed, how they're implemented, what we do with the results, and then how it affects the overall product. That's kind of the chronologically. The process of designing and building these is fairly straightforward, although it's surprising how many people don't go through that process and just use the same sheets over and over again. We try to do a pretty deep dive with your staff. We had an interview with Chris, and I believe there was one other person from your facilities department in that, really trying to find out, okay, what are the projects that are needed? What are the costs? What are the pieces of the puzzle? Not that we're going to be able to test for every one of them, but there's almost always something that rises to the top, something that's, well, that's different. That's something we really need to think about. So that's a process we go through. Those notes get written up, distributed to everybody. And then the staff begins to work on the actual instrument. When we're designing that instrument, we do have a format, obviously, keeping in mind that we're trying to keep that interview to about 10 minutes. Now, I know there are some survey research firms and professional firms that do this, and that's all they do. They don't do the financial advisory work as well. They'll often run 15 or 20 minutes. How they get there, I don't know. That just seems like a long time to keep the person on the telephone, but they do it. And they have a very much more detailed methodology. Personally, I think I know what we're looking for. I think we know what we're trying to get at. And I try to keep it to a point where somebody can get through this in 10, sometimes 11 minutes. We'll make a decision regarding whether it's in one language or other languages, and that is usually dependent not on the languages within the school system, but on the languages that are requested on ballots. Because remember, we're talking only to people that are voting, we're talking only to people that are going to vote, and we can get the data that shows us how many people requested ballots in different languages. So we use a system where if it's over 5%, that's an automatic. There are times, however, when the district will request, we'd like to have this in Spanish. We'd like to have this in Tagalog, whatever the language is. Keep in mind that raises the cost. I mean, that is, and it does also extend the time. And sometimes it's difficult. We've done some surveys in Vietnamese, trying to find a Vietnamese interpreter that can really understand the survey work and get it done timely manner. It took some time and it's complicated, but we got there. So it's always possible. In general, what we are trying to do when we put these surveys together goes something like this. The first piece of the puzzle is to gather the names of the people that are going to be called. Once the document, and it looks something like this, and you'll get a copy of it. I'm happy for you to review it and make comments on it. But once the document is prepared, then it goes over to the firm that is going to do this collection. They are going to do a draw on registered voters who are high propensity registered voters, meaning, there's going to be low propensity as well, but they want to have people that at least are voters at some point in time. We'll also usually take out the names of the board members because we think we know your vote already. So we're really looking for the opinions of the community, not opinions of the board members. So in a smaller community, that makes a difference. In this community, not necessarily. Then the way the survey is designed is right off the top. They start out asking the person if they plan on voting in the next election, the election that we're, in this case, the presidential election. If the person says no, then thank you very much, and they hang up and move on. Sorry, before I go there, let me also talk about how these people are being reached. Now, there was a time many years ago, which some of us can remember, when everybody actually had a telephone and they would answer it. Yeah. Remarkably, however, a very large percentage of these are still done on a telephone. And now that has shifted. It's now, let's say 40%, 50% mobile, 20% landline, of 100%. And then that other 30% is online. So people are getting emails or texts to get them to an online survey. So the system has changed. It is, it's frankly not as good as it used to be. I mean, there's no reason to tiptoe around that. You have people that won't answer the phone, people that won't answer questions. There's some bias in that, I think. But still, at the end of the day, we get especially in a district with a robust group of voters, you're going to get a fairly good sense within the margin of error, which I'll discuss in a minute, of where the recipients and where the respondents are on this issue. So we start out asking if they're going to vote. Then there are a handful of warm-up questions, what I call them. Really, that's about assuring the person that you're not trying to get their code to their bank account, or they're not trying to sell them insurance, and give them a couple of questions. And then, and those are, what do you think of how would you rank the overall fiscal responsibility of the district, for example? Questions that are interesting, but not critical. And then, without any other questions, the interviewer reads the interviewee what we believe those 75 words on the ballot will sound like. So when you put a measure on the ballot, you probably remember this, for a general obligation bond, there is a ballot question which is limited to 75 words. It has to be a question. It has to be a sentence, a tortured sentence often, but a sentence. And it has to have a number of pieces required under the law having to do with what the funds are being used for, what the protections are. So the kind of legalese that has to be in that ballot question. So out of those 75 words, the available real estate is maybe half. The rest of the words are required. So we're based on past experience, based on what we know that the district is seeking, the major projects, we'll craft what we think that ballot language will probably look like. And we'll ask them after we read that, would you vote yes or no on this measure? If they say, I don't know, they get a second prompt, which is, well, would you be leaning yes or would you be leaning no? And then we have a group that's still, I don't know. There's always a group in the middle, I don't know. But then you have a sense of where you are on the yeses and the nos, because you take the yes and the lean yes, the no's and the lean no's. Now, I was showing a client today, a survey that we just did for their district was down in the Santa Cruz area. And this is unusual, but it happens. They've had roughly 15% hard no and roughly 4% leaning no. And then at the end of the survey, when everything is done and we've given them all this information, we asked them the question again. Now that you've heard all this information, do you want to change your vote? And they had a 15% no and a 4% lean no. I mean, nobody changed. Because that's just part of the issues. People knows typically are no's. But we want to know what that number is, right? We want to know what that number is. So once they hear that language, we then ask them a series of questions regarding that fall into kind of three various categories. The first category is about the projects that you're considering. Now, we're not trying to find what projects you can do and what projects you can't do. We're trying to find out what projects kind of rise to the top in terms of voter interest, in terms of that's a project I would support, that's a project I'm interested in. Then we'll rank those, which projects do well, which projects don't do well. And that gives us a sense of the direction of how we should proceed. And I'll go into that in a second. The second area are really attitudinal questions. So for example, we might ask a question, if you knew that none of the bond funds would be used to pay administrative salaries, would you be more likely or less likely to vote for this measure? So they're not projects, they're how they feel as a voter. I teach a class with the San Diego County Taxpayers Association for board members and business officials down in San Diego. And I got into a little argument with the head of the Taxpayers Association a while ago because I was telling the students that over the last couple of years, one of the strongest attitudinal arguments was that asking the voter, if you knew that these funds could not be taken by the state and spent elsewhere, would you be more likely? Well, it doesn't take a genius to realize over the last couple of years that has that has continued to move up the ladder. He took issue. He thought that was just manipulating the voter. Those were his words. You're just manipulating the voter with that. But my response was no. We're trying to find out if they know that. I mean, most people don't understand how this works. People don't understand how schools are financed. They think there's this pot of money in Sacramento that they divvy up somehow. And the question is honest. The question is, if you knew that these funds, which are local funds, are going to be spent locally and they're not going to be taken by the state and spent elsewhere, how would you feel about that? And I think that's a legitimate question. So it'll be interesting to see how that works here. So that's the second. The third is the tax rate. We test the tax rate. Now that's a more difficult question because the way tax rates work on these bonds, it's not easily translated into what it costs an individual because it's based on the assessed valuation of a house. And as you know, you might have two houses that are exactly alike right next door to each other. And one person pays a couple $100 in property taxes and one person pays a couple $1,000 in property taxes, just because of the assessed valuation, because of this unique system that we have in California. So we test that in dollars per $100,000 of assessed valuation. It's not perfect, but it gives us a sense. We're trying to get some sense of where that number is. Sometimes we'll put in, although I don't anticipate doing it in here just because of the time, sometimes we'll put in some questions that are negative questions, negative information questions. So for example, and I think that the purpose for this one is beginning to fall by the wayside, but you might ask, some people say that this is the wrong time because of inflation, for example. How does that affect? With that, hearing that, does that make you more likely or less likely to vote for the bond issue? We might have counter arguments. Other people say it's only going to cost more if we wait. Hearing that, blah, blah, blah. So if we have time, we can put those in. I frankly don't find those terribly helpful. I think they're interesting, but I'm not sure what we do with them when we have them. If we're just going to put this on a presidential ballot, it's pretty tough to communicate that information. We might also, going back to that ballot language that I described, we might also do what's called a split sample on that. A split sample is we'll take half of the people and ask them the question one way, and we'll take the other half of the people and ask them the question the other way, and see if it has any effect. Sometimes we'll do that with tax rates. Sometimes we'll ask half the people, and this law is changing, we're not going to be able to do it as much, or there's some consideration that it may have changed. But we may ask people, half the people, dollars, for example, $60 per $100,000 of assessed valuation. We'll ask the other half 6 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. It's always interesting to see if you're in a community where people can do math and they can figure out that that's the same number. But we'll sometimes split that and try to figure out, okay, which has the most understanding among the voters. And then, as I already mentioned, we will come back at the end and we will ask them the ballot question in an abbreviated form, again, to see if there's been movement in either direction. And that's frankly not as unusual as it sounds. There are districts that you would recognize that consistently the yes vote goes down the more information they get. They like the idea of voting for a bond. But then when they start hearing exactly what it's going to be used for, it's like, well, I don't know, maybe I don't like it that much. So we have to be sensitive to that. I don't anticipate that here, but it happens every once in a while.
Dale, when you do the survey or pose the questions, do you do different amounts of a bond? And would that be something the board determines ahead of time? Do you use the survey to assess what that amount might be? What they'd be willing to?
Well, we usually use the maximum. And then adjust it based on the tax rates. Occasionally we'll do a split sample and say, some of that one group will be, I'll just make up the number. One group will be 125 million and the next group will be 225 million. Again, strangely, often the case is the higher amount does better. In fact, that is very often the case that the higher amount does better. But yeah, we'll often do that. There's only so many ways you can kind of split it. And you know, it's I'm sure you've all seen Star Wars with the trash compactor. You know, I mean, you start spreading, you run out of ways to split it because pretty soon you just have two smaller groups that you're talking to. So, and then we also gather a few pieces of data at the end, such as do you have children that have ever taken or do now or have ever attended class in the district? How do you get your information from the district? And then other stuff that comes up as necessary. Okay, so that's what we ask. Then what we do with that information is we will present it to you, obviously. You know, we'll set it up in a way that you can quickly absorb it, as opposed to, you know, pouring through this, you know, what rises to the top, where are people, what works well, what doesn't work well, what do we recommend? And then we'll also use it to do a final draft of, assuming you want to go forward, a final draft of the ballot language. If there's something that people simply don't understand or something that they really like or really dislike, we might move that around. If there's something that's just in the middle, maybe we'll throw it out. So you want to have something that is, say, it's not necessarily trying to put a happy face on it. I've called them more, what are the marquee projects? What are the projects that people care about? And let them know that those are part of this program. I think that's it. I think that's the process. That process takes a couple months to a month or so to draft. We're pretty much through the drafting process. We've had the interview with Chris, as I mentioned. Assuming you want to continue to go forward tonight, then we'll distribute the questions to Chris or to the superintendent. She can distribute to them. We'd like a fairly rapid turnaround. Everybody's going to want to make comments. I understand that, but we ask that you don't try to redraft the questions. They're drafted. If you say, I'd like to know why this or why that, that's fine. But saying, well, maybe you should ask it this way. Well, there's a reason we ask the questions the way we ask the questions. And we also like to ask many of the questions, the same questions over and over again in districts across the state. So we get some sort of sense of where does this compare with the rest of the state. I think that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the process, projects, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you, Dale. Chris, do you want to add anything before we kind of move on to questions?
Good evening, everyone. No, actually, I'll turn it back over to the board to ask staff if you guys have any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. So turn it over to the board. Any questions?
I'm wondering about timing as we're approaching the holidays now. How does that timing affect people's ability to respond or your ability to get it done, get the survey done, and all of that?
Not as much as you would think. I asked that same question of the professionals. Obviously, they're not going to be making calls on November 25th or December 25th, but the Thanksgiving week's out, Christmas week's out, New Year's week is out, but the others, it just keeps going. That does not stop them. It's going to slow it down a little bit, but in terms of getting it back to you, I would say, depending on how fast the questions come back, how fast the comments come back, logically, February or March, we'll have results back to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you. That's all.
Go ahead, Satish.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. What's the sample size approximately, or is it a percentage, or what is that?
We will shoot for 400.
400?
Yeah. And that should be doable in this community, frankly. You have 80,000 voters roughly, so I'm not worried about hitting 400.
Is it I know you are better than us, maybe that is a standard or a reasonable one, or you go more, you get a, I know, but
Yeah, no, the margin of error between 300 and 400, and again, I'm not an expert in this, but what I've been read and been told, between 300 and 400 sample in this size, you're going to get a a margin of error of, roughly 4.95%, something like that. After you go over 400, yeah, it's going to improve a little bit, but it doesn't improve a lot. And it just becomes more costly. So that sweet spot is that 300 to 400. I have been told.
I'm glad you asked that question because I had that question. In addition to that, thank you for being here today. I know for myself, I don't pick up any phone calls that I don't recognize. It gets silenced. What happens when you all call? Do you leave a message or do you just kind of go on to the next caller?
Yeah, we go on to the next one.
Okay, and then the follow-up is, how do you all identify yourselves in general when you're called so that they don't hang up?
Well, the firm that does it, I will read it to you. I'll read you their introduction, it's all scripted. I mean, these are people, just to be clear, I mean, these are people sitting at a desk with a headset. And the call comes in and they read the script and they are not to engage. They're not there to answer questions. They're not there to give information. We're really looking for a one-way conversation. They read, they get the answers. Hello, my name is, I'm calling from blank blank, national polling firm. We're conducting a public opinion survey regarding local schools in your community. It's pretty much that simple. We're not selling anything. I won't ask you for a contribution or a donation. Can I ask you a few questions? And that's the way every one of them starts.
Great. Thank you very much. Those are my questions. You got anything?
So I think, end of the day, what I'm really interested in is the efficacy in these surveys in predicting the actual results. So I was wondering if you could say a bit, you spoke a lot about the process and the how, so I don't really have any questions. But for me, it's really about, okay, we surveyed 400 folks. We're gonna ask, presumably you'll come back to us with this amount, this percentage support, this amount, that percentage support. How well historically does that correlate to the actual election results? If you could just comment on that.
Yeah, remarkably well. I mean, I have the same question every year. Now, when we get, to be fair, when we get down to a community that has a couple thousand voters, I have to tell them, this is not going to be predictive. This is going to be a good sense of where you are, but your margin of error here is going to be 10%. You're still better than nothing. Your margin of error is going to be 5%. So what that means, if we come in and say it's going to be 65%, your margin of error is going to be somewhere between 60 and 70%. Now, how good is that? That's a bell curve, basically. You're going to have pieces, you're going to have out on the edge that 5% on either side that something happens, either this is wrong, or some other event intercedes, and that's going to, good or bad, and that's going to move those higher than that or lower than that. And I have gone back, taken those results that we've had, compared them to the results, and that remains pretty consistent. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good.
How does that bell curve, how is it affected by voter turnout? We have, 4 years ago, the last presidential election, I think we had over 85% turnout. So it's really high, right? So does that make your polling more predictable, less predictable because you're capturing? Okay.
Yeah, because turnout affects everything. Turnout, I mean, you're elected officials, you know this. Turnout affects who votes, affects everything, because you can think of it as this pie chart of your electorate, and the conservative, not so conservative, someplace in the middle. Well, as turnout expands and contracts, those shares of the pie don't stay the same. I mean, you have a much more conservative base in a small turnout election. So yes, it becomes much more difficult, frankly, especially in a primary or the gubernatorial primary this year, 50% turnout, something like that, just isn't as good.
Okay. And then you talked about sort of, the different projects and, certain projects become marquee projects in this phone survey. Is there going to be an opportunity to test that, or are we primarily testing different amounts, or are we gonna be able to test? Is a gymnasium better than a racetrack kind of thing?
Not in a comparative way, but yeah, in a ranking way, yes.
In a ranking way, so
Yes.
you'll be able to come back with
Oh,
that.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Great.
mean, you look at that, that's a probably 50% of it is, you know, how do you feel about this project? How do you feel about this project? Because, I mean, not to go on and on with these stories, but I remember in one community, the superintendent said, we want to test a building of a performing arts center. Can you put that in the poll? I said, sure, I'll put it in the poll. I can tell you where it's going to land. It's going to land dead last, but I'll put it in the poll. It was the top right. All right. He knew his community. You know, he knew his community, and I didn't. So you got to keep an open mind on these. We put them in, rotate the questions as they're being asked. So not everybody's getting number one in the first place, number two. So all that happens, and then sort them out. So you see what's at the top, what's at the bottom.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks.
I had two questions. One, just, I'm trying to think about our community specifically, you know, being here in Silicon Valley, being in a community where, you know, 72% of our student population is Asian. And, you know, the voter demographic, as well as thinking about the percentage of people who would answer a phone, kind of similar to what Eva was saying. I'm just trying to get your sense of any kind of experience or history that you've had with maybe larger immigrant populations or Silicon Valley districts, or, you know, just kind of more centralized to where we are regionally.
Sure. One thing I didn't say, and let me add, is once the results come in, it's not like, okay, now we got this big bucket of results. How did the results do? Then the professionals will take those results and they're going to balance them. They're going to use those results, bringing some up higher, some down lower, to try to get something that resembles the demographics of your community, because of exactly what you said. You may have, let's take an easier example. You may have a lower amount of conservative voters respond than are shown in the voter registration in the community. So you might want to rebalance that to make that. And so you're going to find some subtleness in that. However, you're right. It is difficult in communities, especially language differences. It's difficult. Now, most people, again, I go by that ballot that's requested, even in communities that have very large populations where English is a second language, and they are always communicating in their first language. The percentage of people that request a ballot in a different language than English usually remains very small. So remember, we're looking to talk to voters, people that are voting. That may not be representative of your community, but that's who we care about, because that's the people that are going to make the decision. I have not seen any difference in the efficacy of the results, be it on the Mexican border, be it in Santa Clara County, be it up in, literally, we've run campaigns and elections on the Oregon border and the Mexican border at the same time. And the questions are just the same, not just the same, but just the validity of those questions are just the same, as well as any place in between. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Okay. So my second question is probably more directed to staff. Can you help me understand the timeline a little bit? Because we've got the facilities master plan, we've got some sort of, I assume, some sort of discussion or maybe input gathering session to see what we need or what we want, or how much it's all going to cost. Where is that in the timeline of a survey and figuring out what's on that survey and amounts and things like that? I don't know, maybe Chris, would you be the best person to answer that?
Sorry, I was just listening again. So you mentioned about the timeline as it pertains to the other pieces in terms of determining which projects, what those costs might be, and things like that. I still think it goes back to what Dale was referring to, is that the survey is going to identify those projects that rise to the top. Once we have that information, I would be saying that we would go back and look at that in comparison to the facilities master plan to see how those items ranked amongst those that participated in the facility master plan, to see how those align. And I think, and I'll have maybe Dale mention this. I think what happens then at that point in time is then the board really then sits down and looks at how those items that were identified through the ranking of the facility master plan, how they compare to the results of the survey, to then whittle that down to really which projects would we want to then incorporate as part of that ballot language.
Yeah, let me jump in there if I may. First of all, I want to make sure that you understand that just by the nature of the beast here, or the 10-minute phone call, this is not getting terribly granular. We're not putting in dollar amounts. We're not talking about subsection S and subsection Y. It is real. So, for example, I'll read you a question. If you knew that funds would be used to expand kindergarten and transitional kindergarten classrooms, would you be more likely or less likely? So it's at a very high level that we're talking about. The survey is used to help you make your decision about whether it's worth it to move forward. It helps us in designing a ballot language that best highlights what you're doing. But then there's another piece which doesn't have anything to do with the survey. And that's the resolution that the board has to pass in order to get on the ballot. In that resolution, there will be the ballot language because you're asking the county to put that on the ballot, but you're also going to have a document in that which is called the project list. And the project list is going to be without rank, without saying this is our first and this is our second, without dollar amounts. It's going to say these are the projects that we are going to attempt to, not promise to, we are going to attempt to fund or could fund with these funds. And that's not, doesn't have anything to do with this survey. That's really what you need and what you want, because things change. Needs change. And we want to give you a broad brush on that. So if in 2 or 3 years there is something you need, we have to say, oh gosh, we should have put that in that project list, but it didn't do well on the survey. You don't want to be in that spot. You want to have the flexibility that the voters are giving you to address the needs as they arise.
I think what I would just add as well, we completed the facility master plan back in 2019, but it was done with extensive input from community and from staff. And so we certainly want to, take value into that work that was done and see where it matches up. Time-wise, purposely we were beginning these discussions. What we were hoping for is early, because we don't actually have to do the resolution till August, I believe, time-wise, or is it earlier than that?
I would say late second quarter would be best. Yeah, late second quarter, mid to late second quarter, but you can pass it anytime. But there are only so many Monday, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays in the month, and pretty soon you run out of time, and you really need to think through when are we going to do this, and make sure everybody's here, and make sure people are on vacation, and not miss that deadline.
One of the things we heard in the last couple of parcel taxes that we have not been successful in passing, and I know bonds are different, but I just want to know how it compares. Our community members would say, we're not going to vote yes on this because you're not telling us exactly what you're going to spend the money on. Is that as big a factor with bonds as it could be with parcel taxes? Because you mentioned the project list of flexibility.
Yeah, no, I guess the answer is yes, but the answer is a little twisted. Yes, I am at the risk of being overly glib. I call those the I would have voters. I would have voted for you if you would have just. I would have voted for you if you would have put that stadium in. I would have voted for you if you would have dealt with this problem. But you can never get to the point where they say yes. So yes, that happens, but I don't think it's a major factor.
Significant. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sylvia.
Do we have any public comments on this item?
No, we do not.
I mean, I know this is a discussion item, so we looking just for some guidance or?
We are, we had brought it back in August, as I said, back in August 24th, I think was the first time we brought it forward. And so really, we would like to continue the work so that we can put out the survey, bring that information back to you. And so we just wanted to give an update and make sure that we are still moving in that direction and Dale can proceed with creating the survey.
When would the results come back to move forward?
I think we'd have them back to you in late February, early March.
I'm good with that.
Satish?
Yeah, I'm good. Actually, I want the survey to go. Yeah, and again, going back to this, the efficacy part of it, the only thing, and I think maybe you answered that it's reasonably accurate in terms of this 5% error. So if it is, the challenge is if it is closer to the number and a 5% margin, that's where we'll have to, that is the tough call from there. If there is a significant margin, what we have from threshold, I think it should be okay. But anyway, I think the only way is the survey. So let's do that.
Other thoughts?
I'm on board with the survey.
I'm in favor of moving forward. Do you need anything else from the board other than just, okay?
Thank
you.
Right. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Dale. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Dale.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, we are going to move on to our next agenda item, which is action items. 9.1, approval of the health and welfare MOU for CEA, CSEA, and SEIU. And this is an action item, so I do need a motion on the table before we proceed.
I move to approve 9.1 approval of the Health and Welfare Memorandum of Understanding for CEA, CSEA, and SEIU.
Thank you, Ava. And a second.
Second.
Thank you, Phyllis. All right, is there any presentation for this?
No, there's not.
Okay. All right, and do we have any public comments for this?
No, we do not.
All right, then let's do a roll call vote.
Trustee Manhattan.
Aye.
Trustee Chow.
Aye.
Trustee Lu.
Aye.
Trustee Vogel.
I, with enthusiasm, I think this is great.
Trustee Leon.
Aye. All right, thank you. Motion passes, and I will also just echo that, this is really exciting that we're able to do this 100% coverage for our employees and 75% for the dependents. And thank you to the Health and Welfare Committee for working on this so hard. We know it took a lot of time. And we know that rising healthcare costs are a big issue. And so I'm really glad that as a district, we're able to do this. So, all right, we're going to move on to the next action item, 9.2, adoption of resolution 23-24-18, authorizing the execution and delivery of lease purchase agreement with Bank of America. This is an action item, so I need a motion on the table. Can I get a motion?
I move.
Okay, thank you, Phyllis. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jerry. And any presentation on this one?
So we'll do a brief highlight of it. We know that the contract's there, but this is our continued work that we're exciting. At our last board meeting, we had Engie who provided the update on our solar, and this is really that next step of how are we going to fund and receive the lease. So Chris has been working with the bank to secure the financing, and so we'll have him highlight a couple of the pieces on it.
Okay, great.
Yeah, again, thank you. Good evening. So as Stacy mentioned tonight, this is the last piece of our project here to get solar panels installed in the district. As we have shared with the board, we have worked out an agreement with Engie to design, build the system, and to be able to finance the system. We've had to reach out, and through a competitive process, we've selected Bank of America to underwrite the loan to afford us the ability to install the project. The loan is roughly about a 20-year loan. The interest rate is now set. There were some adjustments, little adjustments since the last time we talked about it. The final rate adjustment is, I believe it's 4.83 the interest rate for the loan. There is provisions in the agreement that will allow us, in the event that we receive additional funds, to ultimately pay off the loan prior to final maturity. There is a slight premium for that. It's about a 1.02 or a 2% additional cost should the district have that option. So that option is there, and maybe that kind of is kind of associated with our last topic about the bond. Should we be able to pass a bond, there is that possibility that we could use bond proceeds to then fully pay off the Bank of America loan in advance. So there's a connection there. Other than that, attached are the documents. There is an agreement with Bank of America. There's an escrow agreement as well. If there are any questions in regards to some of the legality language in there, we do have Judy Firth with Stradling, our bond counsel, online here tonight as well. So I will turn it back to the board for any other comments or questions.
Great, thank you, Chris. Do we have any questions from the board? Statistics?
I think, I don't know whether you answered, it's a fixed, I think I asked this to superintendent as well. Is it like this 4.83 is fixed for 20 years, 20 years, right?
20 years, yes.
And, okay. And you said the prepayment penalty is 1.3%.
1.2%, yeah, 1.02%.
Okay, and last one, when I think, I don't know whether we discussed this last time, we had some comparison also between multiple lenders on this, or this is the best one we went out?
Yes, when we went through the RFP process, there were several proposals. This was obviously the best proposal, that we went with the best proposal.
That's it. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, good. Okay, I didn't have any either. So do we have any public comments for this item?
No, we do not.
All right, let's do a roll call vote.
Trustee Manhaco.
Aye.
Trustee Chow.
Aye.
Trustee Lu. Trustee Vogel.
Aye.
Trustee Leon.
Aye. Great. Thank you. Motion passes. All right, and our next item is 10.1, board activity. This is a chance for board members to share and receive information regarding committee meetings or events that they have attended. So who would like to start?
I don't have anything to report.
I don't have anything to report.
All right.
I started,
Go
school- I just started school visits this week, so I'm excited to get going on that. I haven't done any yet this year, so got four schools this week, so. Good, all good.
Awesome. I got to attend the Battle of the Books at Eisenhower Elementary, which was so much fun. The winnings, each team, there were two teams that were competing. They were the finalists. They each had to read, each team had to read 20 books. And then they were quizzed, and Principal Greenfield was there and kind of being the quiz show host, and they all had buzzers, and it was amazing. And all the other kids came in for the assembly to watch them and cheer them on. And you would have thought it was like some Olympic sport because the way that they were cheering. So it was really fun. It was their first year doing it. And I told him he should invite all of us next time, and he will do that. So that was really fun. And then the other thing that I was able to attend was the Hyde Middle School versus Miller Middle School wrestling match. It's one of the last meets of the season. That's CUSD school against CUSD school. It was really fun because both Hyde and Miller have really large teams. In fact, Miller has almost 100 kids on their wrestling team. They've really been able to build it. Hyde is also a very strong program. And so myself and Principal Nuno were both there. We were cheering for different teams. I won't say which ones, but it was really great to see all of the community out there, and so many parents and so many coaches and alumni and all those folks out there. So if you guys get a chance to go, visit some of the after school sports activities, I highly encourage it.
Did you also want to highlight Veterans Day event at Miller?
And Veterans Day, do you want to highlight that? Superintendent Yao and I got to attend the Veterans Day observation at Miller, which is always an amazing event. They invited veterans from this local area, and there was about probably 25, maybe 30 veterans that came. Miller Band played all of the military songs. I don't think they're called theme songs, but the official songs. The choir sang all of the songs, and then with each song, each different branch of the military, those veterans stood up, and the students were cheering, and then afterwards they were all dismissed, and the veterans got to go to different classrooms and just answer questions. And the students asked great questions, and it's like a really moving event. And so it's a tradition at Miller, and it's just great that community gets to do something like that.
Wow.
Anything? Am I forgetting anything else?
That's great because like not only they get honored, but they get to share a piece of their experience, and it's people from our own community. There's a lot of pride that goes into that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Oh yeah, and the PTA does a phenomenal job. The veterans just hang out for like hours afterwards, eating the snacks and the refreshments and just catching up with one another. So, thank you to the principal and the leaders over there who are doing that. All right. Last on the agenda tonight is agenda setting. So does anyone have any agenda items they are either calling to review or requesting new items to be added?
I have sort of maybe two requests more around the potential information requests, not necessarily agenda items. The first is we've gotten a number of emails, in the last few days about just staff working in special education. And so it was really good to I felt like I have a better understanding of what works for them and what are the challenges. And so that was really good. I was hoping to get maybe information more at a macro level, just in terms of, and there were, I think some of the mail that stood out to me commented on the instruction aids, the number thereof, et cetera, et cetera. So I was wondering, so that was helpful. But then I'd like to maybe understand a bit more about the number we have, the assignments to the schools, and then the kind of credentials and qualifications that enables one to serve as a special ed IA. So that could just come as an item. I just wanted to learn more about the system. So that's one item. The other item is I've been reading a lot about sort of the use of AI in education, particularly with language models. I know this, for instance, Sal Khan, who's going to be speaking at CSBA. Khan Academy has this thing called Kamigo, right? That does personalized essay writing, teaching, not doesn't write your essay. And I that was sort of intriguing. I'm kind of interested in maybe what our district thoughts are on sort of use of AI. So again, no hurry, but I'd like to maybe get that somewhere in the queue. I'd love to hear about that. So 2 items.
I would support both of those items as well. And I think maybe like beyond maybe the Friday memo, but maybe a study session, that would be great for us to do a deep dive on special ed and what's happening and what's going on, and how the whole process works. Anything else?
I agree with the 2 items. And in addition to what you're talking about, is like, I'm not familiar with each job and how much time that is allotted, or if any, for IEPs. My understanding with friends being in special education is sometimes they're 80 to 120 pages, depending on like the IEPs and what they're putting in. So what I've heard is that it's very time consuming, and I'm wondering if it's to kind of if there's a gauge or numbers on how long people have, and if that's part of the workday.
No. Great. All right. So with that, I'm going to close tonight's meeting. We're going to be meeting again in 3 weeks for our next board meeting on December 7th. We will all, as a board and leadership, be attending the California School Boards Association Annual Education Conference. So we're looking forward to that. And just want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and a wonderful break.
And speaking about the conference after Thanksgiving, I think this is the first time we've ever had all of EC go to that, isn't it? So that's awesome. I'm glad you guys are going. I think it's wonderful. Yeah.
Great. All right, and I adjourn this meeting at 7:29.